am Nick Johnson, and this is the Classical Pairings Host Challenge brought to you by the National Bank of Indianapolis. I'm having people from around Indianapolis send me their favorite type of music and their favorite local distillery or brewery. I'm coming up with some sort of drink and a piece of classical music to pair it all together. This week we have Blake Johnson from the Indiana General Assembly and the president of IndyHub. Take it away, Blake.
Hey there, my name is Blake Johnson. I'm a member of the Indiana General Assembly where I serve in the House of Representatives. I represent District 100, which is on the east side of the city. I'm also the president and CEO of IndyHub, which is a local nonprofit that focuses on getting Area 20 and 30-somethings more connected, involved, and making a difference. So we host events, volunteer fairs, social gatherings, experiences, leadership development, anything you can think of that would help Indianapolis feel more like home to 20 and 30-somethings. Really excited to participate in classical pairings. The music I really like is folk rock, so I love artists like Damien Rice. I love the Lumineers, the Avett brothers. Also, in terms of local drink that I'm really into, I love West Fork whiskeys, cask strength rye called Old Hammer, and just like to have that on the rocks, especially after a long day. So looking forward to the pairing that you're going to pull together.
All right, thank you so much, Blake. Two of my favorite things are folk music and rye whiskey, so I had a lot of fun putting it together this week. I decided for the music to go with the Avett brothers. I'm going to use the song I Wish I Was from their album True Sadness from 2016. I spent a while trying to think of a particular song that sort of I thought resonated with the whiskey, and we'll get to the cocktail here in just a minute, but there's something sort of heartfelt about this piece, but also very, very thoughtful, like, to be honest, most of the Avett brothers' music, that I thought would work really well with this cocktail. So if you're not familiar with the Avett brothers, they're a folk group. Earlier groups you might be, they remind me of sort of Neil Young or Chris Christopherson. They're sort of part of this modern neo-folk trend in the 21st century that is sort of trying to manufacture this kind of sense of nostalgia for a simpler time or a simpler past that especially tends to resonate, to be perfectly honest, with more kind of urbanites. Folk music tends to be a little more aimed at people living in cities, whereas country music tends to sometimes be aimed at like a different population. I decided to just go with the low-hanging fruit here and go with Antonín Dvořák Symphony No. 9 from the New World. And in particular, I thought the second movement, which is the slow movement, bum, 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 the very sort of beautiful, heartfelt melody. Dvořák wrote this piece when he was in America. He had actually toured through America. He was particularly interested in music of Native Americans and African Americans, and was interested in sort of integrating it into his symphonic language. And so there's no direct quotes in this piece, but it's more sort of the spirit of the piece. He was also inspired by just the wide open countryside. He took a trip to the Midwest, and seeing vast, huge plains sort of inspired his music, which itself is very nostalgic, rural, and heartfelt. So I wanted to come up with a cocktail that was somehow sort of rustic, sort of earthy, that is a nostalgic cocktail in some ways. And right now, we're enjoying these beautiful Indiana summer nights where the sun doesn't set until like 10 p.m. And it's the perfect time to just sit outside and drink a cocktail, especially now in a vac summer, and to reconnect with our friends and to reconnect with ourselves. So I decided to do a play on a mint julep. A cocktail that, for me at least, is sort of nostalgic. It's ties to things like the Kentucky Derby, these century-long traditions. But I wanted to play with it a little bit. The spirit we're going to be using is, as Blake suggested, the Old Hammer Straight Rye Whiskey. This is cask strength. Now, Blake, I agree with you. You can absolutely just sip on this on the rocks. This is a big, it's a big sort of, it's 115 proof. It kind of hits when it comes at you. But it is a deliciously good cask strength. You might even, to be perfectly honest, throw a little splash of water in this, or a little bit of ice melt is going to help this go down a little bit smoother, just because it's got so much going on. We actually used one of the Old Hammer Ryes, the first episode of this season, but this is the cask strength, so it's a different one. It's got more power in it. Taste-wise, I think it's a little more spice, a little more aggressiveness, but there's also a little bit somehow more sweetness, and I have no idea how they did that at West Fork, but good for them. All right, so I wanted to come up with how to do a julep with this, with a pretty aggressive big spirit. Normally I would do a julep with something that's about 80 proof, and this is 115 proof. So you've got to make a couple adjustments for that, but I had a lot of fun putting this together. We're just going to call this, by the way, the Summer Rye Julep. So we're going to start with a shaker. We are going to be muddling, again, just like we did last week with basil. This week we're going to start with 4 mint leaves, drop those in the shaker. Then I'm going to use a sugar cube. You may remember if you watched last season, I did an absinthe drip, and these are the sugar cubes that we made for that. You could use simple syrup, but I'm about to be muddling, and muddling a sugar cube is extremely satisfying. And so that's the reason I chose a sugar cube. So you can kind of grind it into the mint, and it's just a lot of fun. We're then going to hit that with Woodford Reserve's Sassafras and Sorghum Bitters. I have used those before. These are one of my favorite bitters for any sort of kind of sweet, like a cocktail that's using mint or other things that you're wanting to sort of enhance butter kind of flavor or sweet flavor. So anyway, Sassafras and Sorghum Bitters. We're then going to do, and this is unlike a normal julep, we're going to hit it actually with 1 ounce of brandy, and really just any brandy will do. This is a little bit, because I love the interplay of brandy with rye whiskey. There are many cocktails like the Vieux Carré that relies on the interaction of brandy and rye whiskey. And here it's gonna soften the rye just a little bit. Make it just a little more palatable in a cocktail. Not that it's gonna detract from the rye. We're still gonna get everything that's great about the rye, but then we're gonna kind of smooth the edges out just a little bit. So we're gonna go ahead and muddle this all together. There's the, I don't know if you're picking up that sugar cube cracking. It's so nice though. And again, with the muddler, we're just trying to kind of break the mint leaves up a little bit. We're starting to get a little bit of the oil to come out of that, and to start playing around with the sugar and with the bitters. Okay, there we go. Let that go. We'll grab whatever mint is trying to cling to the muddler for life. We'll put that in. We're now going to top this with ice. And we're going to put in 1.5 ounces of the rye. And so I would usually do 2, but to be honest, you don't need 2 of this. And I'm going to warn you, this cocktail is delicious, but it's a pretty big proof cocktail. So have this cocktail when you are already home for the night and are watching the sunset and listening to some music. All right. So 1.5 ounces of the rye goes in there. And now we are going to shake this, because I'm going to once again try to get the mint to break up even more. I say once again because last week I did sort of a basil shook cocktail. And I'm going for kind of a similar thing here. I'm wanting a little bit, I'm going to encourage some of the ice to break off to keep the drink nice and cold and froth it just a little bit. And I want the mint to release as much as possible. So we're going to go ahead and give this a shake. There we go. Take that off. And we are going to put this onto a whiskey ice cube, or just any large ice cube that's going to melt slowly, because the drink is already cold. But again, this is a pretty high proof cocktail, so keeping it nice and chilled, and also even a little more ice melt's not going to be a problem. So we're going to pour that in. This beautiful sort of frothy, sweet and sugary, minty delight. And then we'll top that with a sprig of mint. If your garden is like ours, you have enough mint to make just a ton of cocktails right now, as it is taking off in this heat. And there we have it, the beautiful summer rye julep. So just like the music we've been listening to, this is perfect for a summer night right now. There's something a little bit nostalgic about it, at least for me. If you think about all the way, the mint julep is a very old cocktail with a very long story. There's something very sort of sweet and thoughtful about it. It's kind of the perfect drink for just sitting on a porch watching a sunset and thinking about wherever your mind is going or wherever the Avett brothers or Dvořák are sending you. So Classical Pairings is a listener-sponsored program. If you like what you hear, you can text PAIR, P-A-I-R, to 202-858-1233 so that we can bring you future episodes pairing classical music with great local craft food and beverages. I'd like to thank my challenger, Blake Johnson, and you can learn more about IndyHub and their events at indyhub.org. If you're interested in being a challenger for the next season of our Classical Pairings Host Challenge, you can email info@classicalmusicindy.org for more information. I'd also like to thank our production assistant, Chloe Bolter, and our producer, Ezra Baker-Trupiano, for their great work, and of course, our friends at the National Bank of Indianapolis for their generous support.